Hey guys, Quasi here. So today we're going to be creating this material design outline text field, and it's going to animate, smoothly in. We're going to be able to put in our content, go ahead and put in whatever we want, and then it's actually going to be responsive to multiple colors. It's going to know what the background is and responsively adapt to it. That way you're not setting it to one color and you're not limiting yourself. You don't have to deal with classes. You don't have to deal with anything like that. It's going to be all through JavaScript, so it's going to be automated for what your background color is going to be for the input. So with that being said, let's get into the objectives. Alright guys, so as said, we're going to have this nice responsive background on the text field. So basically what we're going to be doing is using VueJS to just create it. Very simply, it's going to be all contained inside of one component. It's going to be compatible with the vModel. It's going to be very straightforward. And then of course, we're going to use a couple of functions and lifecycle hooks with Vue to go ahead and make it with that background. And then all you really need for this is HTML, CSS knowledge, some JavaScript knowledge, and some basic Vue knowledge with how we work with components and all that. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the coding. All right, guys, so we're going to get started by running Vue create and then whatever your desired project name is. And then as far as options are concerned, we don't need the linter. All we need is Babel. And everything else can be default here, and then it's going to go ahead and generate the project. All right, guys, so once your project is generated, you're going to want to run npm run serve, which is just going to start the development server for you, and that's going to have hot reloading and all those good features. So once that's started, you're going to want to go to localhost 8080 or whatever the port that it gives you is, and as you can see, we have our default content. We don't really need that, so what we're going to do is go into our source files. Components, we're just going to delete hello world right off the bat, and then in app.vue we're going to delete both of these lines, delete this import, and you know what, you can just go ahead and delete this entire script for the time being. So once that's done, we're going to create a new component, and we're going to call this outlined textfield.vue. All right, so in outline textfield.vue we're going to want to create a template. Go down here, add ourselves a script in JavaScript, and then add ourselves a scoped style. And now we're going to pop back over to app.vue. We are going to import our component that we just created. So of course, we need to create that script again. We're going to do import v outlined text field from which is an alias for our source directory, /components /outlined textfield.vue. And while we're in here, we're going to create our data method and return, and we're just going to do the data for this text field. So we're going to do in this, I'm just going to name it my data and give it a value of test. And then also in here, we're going to create our components object and add the v outline text field component. And then finally, we're going to add some styling to the app. So I'm going to have a nice gray background. So we're going to do background-color #E0, E0, E0. And now this is the important part. We have to add background-color inherit to here. And then finally, we're going to add one more class for usage in our app div. We're going to do a container class, and all it's going to do is have a inherited background color. Once again, it's going to have a width of 400 pixels, and then it's going to have a margin of 0 on the y-axis, and then auto for x. So basically, we're just centering the 400 pixels. And then finally, in here, I'm going to add v-outlined text field with a model to our my data that we just created. I'm going to actually modify this to say test data. Then I'm going to end the outline text field. So we're going to pop back into outline text field, and we're going to add a div with a class of text field -container. And then in here, we're going to want to add a dynamic class a dynamic class, which is going to apply conditionally the class filled when our filled value is true, and we're going to set that up later. Inside of here, we're going to have input with a type of whatever type you want. I'm going to use text for simplicity here. A class of text field, And then we're gonna cap that off, and then we're gonna have a paragraph with a class of Textfield dash label. And I'm gonna name it whatever I want my label. I'm gonna say username for this example. And then we're gonna be done with the actual HTML styling. This is gonna be pretty much it. And then in our script, we're just gonna add props. So our prop is going to be, our one prop is gonna be value. And then we're gonna do a validated prop. So we're gonna require it to be a string. And this is going to be required. Excuse me, let me lowercase that. And it's going to be required. And then we're gonna add data, which is going to return filled, which we just used for our dynamic class up top. And we're gonna set that to false. And then our final methods or properties for now on this component is going to be the computed property. And we're going to just have content. So content is going to be an object with a getter and a setter with a new value. So what we're going to do for the get is just return this dot value, which is what the v model in the app.view is going to be passing down and what we're accepting in the props element. And then for the setter, we are going to do an emit of input, which is what the v model is listening for. And we're just going to pass with that the new value. And then don't forget a comma here. And now that we've set that up, we can add v model is equal to content to the outlined input. And now we're going to get into our CSS. So we're just going to make it. Well, first, let's actually check our document. As you can see, it's looking pretty bad right now. And that was just from before. But now if we clear it and refresh, you're going to see we have no errors going, which is great. So we're going to run into here, and we're going to add our text field container stylings. And for this, we are going to give it a 100% width and then a height of 56 pixels. Relative positioning, because we want all of our elements that are inside of here to be positioned relative to this container. And then we have to explicitly declare a transparent background color, even though that should be by default. And then I'm just going to give it a margin of 10 pixels on the y-axis and then 0 on the x. This can be whatever you want. That's really going to be dependent on however you're building out your app. And then while you're over the container, so while you're hovering it, we're going to give it a cursor of text. So basically it's going to give feedback to the user that they can edit it when they hover it. And then the final thing we're going to be adding, well, the second to final thing we're going to be adding is the actual text field styling. So we're going to do text field container dash text field. And we are going to give this a width of calculatable 100% minus 34 pixels. And I'll explain why that is in a second. So we're going to give it a height of 54 pixels. And then we're going to add our padding. So padding of 0 pixels, 16 pixels, and a margin of 0. So the reason why we set our width to 100% minus 34 pixels is we are going to have a border of 1 pixel. So that's going to be 2 pixels total because we'll have our left border and our right border. And then we have that padding of 16 pixels. So we're going to have the left padding and the right padding. So that's 32 plus the 2 for the border. That's going to be 34 pixels. So that way we keep it to 100% and we're not overfilling the border. And now we're going to add a little bit more to this. We're not quite done. We're just going to add the styling for the border, which is going to be hashtag 9E9E9E. We are going to add our radius. You can make this whatever you like. I think that 6 pixels looks the best. And a font size of 1 REM. And then this is especially important for the text field, we want a transparent background color. And we're going to be done with this initial text field styling now. So we're going to move on to the focused styling. So we're going to do text field dash container dot text field focus. And then, so inside of here, we are going to add just a little bit of code to modify what we've got. So what we are going to do is increase the border to 2 pixels. I'm going to make it solid, and I'm going to make it a nice blue color of hashtag F4285F4, which is going to be a nice blue. We're going to give it an outline of none. And then our width now, we're going to have to change our calculation because we added 2 pixels total to the margin. So we're going to subtract 36 pixels now and give it a height of 52 px, again, getting rid of those extra 2 pixels. So we can see this taking shape, but it does look like I forgot something. So what we're going to want to do is actually cut this, do div.container, add that in. And if we go back into here, you can see that our text field is going to be proper sizing. And again, we're going to see a lot of those styles looking pretty familiar. So now we're going to move on to fixing the label and getting that all set up. So what we're going to open up with is .textfield-container, .textfield-label. Perfect. And then we're just going to do some basic styling. So we're going to give it a padding of 0 and then 4 pixels. And then we're going to adjust the margin to -4 pixels. And this is going to help us later when we set the background color via JavaScript. Basically, we need that padding to give it the margins on each side so that it's not looking bad with the way the line intersects the text. And then we're going to give it an absolute position. But again, that's relative to our text field container. We're going to give it a left of 17 pixels, a top of 4 pixels, and then the same sizing as our the input itself. And then we're going to add a transition dash property, and we're going to give it a left, top, font dash size, and color. And that's what we're going to be transitioning. And then we're nearing the end of the CSS here. So all we have left is actually 2 more selectors. So we're going to do the same text field container, but this time it's going to be focus dash within. And then again, we're going to be selecting the label. And we're just going to be modifying the left to 18 pixels, which is because of the 2 pixels that we're adding, or the pixel that we're adding total on that left side. We're going to give it a top of -16 pixels, a font size of 11 pixels, the color that we had that blue before, right, that we established before, so 4285F4. And then finally, just in case it doesn't get overridden, we're going to give it a z-index of 1, which will put it over all the other elements. It should be on a higher plane by default just because it's lower, but you always want to be explicit with your definitions. And then finally, for if that dynamic class is added, we're going to do textfield-container.filled, which if you remember we declared before. And then we're going to do, again, targeting the text field -label. And we're going to do a left of 18 pixels, so pretty much what we declared before, a top of -16 pixels, so again, what we declared before, and a font size, again, of 11 pixels. And that is going to complete us for all of our CSS. And if we go into our Chrome, we can see that it's looking pretty normal. It's kind of freaking out because of the elements, and it looks like there's something going on with the top, and then set the margin only on the left side to -4 pixels. And that's going to fix us for as far as that's concerned. So as you can see, we have the basic form of our input, but you can see there's a couple of issues here. If you left click the label, it still does not respond and it doesn't open it up. And then obviously it's not setting a background color up here. So we are actually going to go fix those right now by adding in 2 more hooks here, or sorry, 1 more hook and then a methods property. So we're going to add the mounted lifecycle hook, and we're going to do, it's going to be really simple as far as the actual code is, but it's kind of hard to understand. So we're going to do the children of the element, which we're going to get by accessing the element in this specific component and getting the child nodes. And then we're going to do const of text field, which is equal to children 1. And that's because arrays are 0 indexed, and then it's actually the second child, but since it's 0 indexed, it's going to be the first as far as the array is concerned. Then we're going to add the constant L styles which is equal to get computed style. So this is going to grab the computed style of whatever element we feed it, and we're going to grab the text field element, and we're going to get the parent element of that, which, as you can see up here, is going to be the text field container. And we're going to grab the parent element of that, which is in, as far as the HTML, this actually translates to a div, so we're grabbing that div right now. But we can't tell that template to inherit, so we're going to grab one more parent element up the chain, which is now going to be our container in app.view. And since it's the computed style, it's not going to grab the inherit that we set it to. It's going to grab whatever it's actually being set to explicitly with the inherit, if that makes sense. And then we are going to grab, that's actually going to be it for the element styles. And then we are going to grab the text field again, and we're going to set the style, more specifically, the background color, to what we just grabbed, and the background color from that background color. And there we go. So that's going to actually set and determine the background color. Determine the background color of the label. After that, we're going to do an event listener. The input blur event listener. So basically when the user unfocuses it, so children 0, which is going to be our actual text field, or sorry, this is going to be label, and this is also going to be label, and then thirdly, this is going to be label. Sorry about that, just some confusing naming, and I wanted to fix that just so it doesn't get confusing. So we're going to do children 0, which is our text field, and we're going to add the event listener for blur. And if you don't know, the blur is basically when the user clicks off of an element, and we're going to give it a callback function, and it's going to run a method that we're about to establish of this.checkState. And then after that, just in case there's data pre-filled, we're also going to add a check for that, because we don't want it to be only when they zoom out, because you could have data in the element by default, and then it would not respond to that and still not be in the filled state, which we wouldn't want. So we're going to add this.checkState, but we're going to pass true to it this time. And that's actually going to complete our mounted code for the time being. And then we're going to finally add the methods. So what we're going to do is we're actually only going to have one method for this entire thing, and it's going to be checkState. And by default, the created variable is going to be equal to false. And so first off, again, we are going to reestablish our children for this element, which is equal to this.cachel.child nodes. So we're just reestablishing our children. And then we are going to establish a variable so that we can save our transition duration. So I'm going to type in transition duration variable. And I'm going to set this personally to 250 milliseconds. You can set this to whatever you want. You can tweak it to be faster or slower depending on what you want. And now we're going to add in our logic. So we're going to say if the children, which we just declared again in this method, 0.value is not equal to blank, so the value is filled, we're going to add our logic there in a second. Otherwise, this being filled is going to be equal to true. And then the first child, so the label, is going to be style.transition duration is equal to transition duration. So basically we're editing the style of the label to be equal to the transition duration that we established. However, this is actually going to be false because it's not filled. Slight typo there. So then what we're going to do here is add another logic check. So we're going to do if created is equal to true. So essentially if this is or equals true. So if it's truthy. We're going to, and the reason we're doing this check is, like I said, we passed in true here, so that's going to override this default value. And the reason we're doing this initial check is if there's a pre-filled value, we want the input to adapt to it. So what we're going to do is set this filled is equal to true, because now we know that it's going to be filled. But we also want to set a timeout. And in that, all we're going to do is apply the same code we did here of applying the transition duration. And basically what we're doing here, and the reason for doing it this way, is we don't want the we don't want the transition going right away, because if we apply it right away, the label is going to shift and the user is going to see that when they load in. So what we want is for it to instantly snap there. And then after 10 milliseconds, it's going to apply the transition duration. And then any future interactions that the user makes, it'll have the nice animation and the nice transition in between states. And so I just arbitrarily chose 10 milliseconds. You can pretty much fill that with whatever you want, but try to keep it low. And so then we're going to add an else to this. So basically any other time this function is being run and there is a value and it's not the first time it's being run, all it's going to do is essentially what we had down here, but we're going to set this dot filled equal to true. So once we have that, we should see most of the code being working as it's intended to. And if we go into here in app.view and we have our test data pre-filled, if we reload, as you can see, it snaps and we don't see an animation. It's all snappy, but as you can see, we still have a problem, which is if you click where the label is, it's not going to open up the text field. And a lot of times the user might be clicking there. So obviously we want to try to avoid that. So what we're going to want to do is in our methods on outline text field, right after this, we're going to add an event listener. And all this is going to do is focus input when label is clicked. So when the label is clicked, it's going to focus the input. So what we're going to do is add to the label an event listener for click. And we're going to pass the event. And then in here, all we're going to do is reference the text field. So children 0. And we're going to focus it using the focus method. And now if you go into here, there you go. And that's going to be 100% working. And if we go onto here and say, I don't like the gray anymore, I decide I want to make it white. No further setup required. I'm just going to reload. There we go. It automatically responds to it. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this helped you out. I personally had a long struggle with outline text fields because I couldn't quite figure out the logic for as far as, you know, the background color of label and messing around with some before and after like pseudo styles. So hope this helped you. And with that being said, have a great rest of your day.